have to be extremely passionate about wanting to not only be a screenwriter, but put forward stories that mean a lot to you. And I think you just have to be able to keep with it when it gets tough. I think a lot of times off the bat, people think it's just, oh, I have this cool story and I'm just gonna, throw it out there and it'll all come together and, it'll be pretty easy. But once you really get into the craft of storytelling and the mechanics of it and the different aspects you need to incorporate for it to impact people, I think you really have to have a love for it, because you're gonna get bogged down. There's gonna be some hard times and you're gonna hit some walls, and if you don't have a love for it and if you don't enjoy it even during those hard times, then it's not for you.
If I were to talk to aspiring screenwriters coming into our program, I think that I would put out there first that you need to be ready for inspiration. And one of the things that I just kick myself for are times when I was driving in my car, or I just woken up, or I was talking with a friend and I didn't have a notebook. And I know that that's a classic note that people give, like, have a notebook with you, have somewhere to write it down, but you just have no idea what's going to hit you, or what conversation is going to remind you of something that your character is going through, and you think, oh my gosh, that solves the problem. And then if you didn't write it down, it's like gone. It's gone and you didn't write it down, and it kills you, and you'll sit at your computer for the rest of the week or the rest of the month going, I wish I had written that thing down.
If I knew then what I know now, I would have paid a lot more attention to structure while I watched television, especially how the writer would track each character's emotions through a show like The Simpsons. I think they do an excellent job of that.
Simply watch the most TV and the most movies as possible. You simply need to know what's happening, what's on the air, and what people are making. Because for some reason, even if you don't like the TV show, that TV show is on air. And if you're able to look at it from a critical point of view and see what people like in it, then that can help you that much better in your own writing. Because I imagine at some point, at least being a part of the MFA program, you want to write and you want your writing to be produced. So if you know what is being produced, maybe you can write something that's eventually produced.
If I had it to do over again, what I would realize is that if it doesn't work on the stage, it doesn't matter if it works on the page. So beginning writers always want to be clever and witty and smart, and they usually are, so they put these wonderful epigrams and bon mots in the characters' mouths because they can't wait to hear an actor say this wonderfully clever thing they've thought up. But very often it doesn't work once you have actual actors have to say these words, because the audience isn't engaging with the story. They're not watching a script with one hand and reading and saying, boy, I can't wait to see how the actors perform this wonderfully clever line. They're just engaging with the characters emotionally, or they should be. And so if characters suddenly stop and say clever things that don't fit the emotional moment, the scene, the mood, the story, the character's attitude, then it's wrong. They disengage from the story and they don't even hear the joke that you cleverly wrote. The first script I ever wrote was for The Jeffersons, an episode of The Jeffersons. And I was going to show those guys, after they'd been doing it for 8 years, I was going to show them how great an episode of The Jeffersons could really be. So every line was a clever, clever bon mot, and every entrance was outrageous, and everybody came in wearing costumes. And I turned in my first draft and waited for the producers to call me up and tell me, where have I been all their lives, and how could they have ever functioned without me on their writing staff? And instead they called up and said, it's a very clever script, unfortunately it's not The Jeffersons. And then they proceeded to explain to me everything I'd done wrong. And I remember one of them saying, sometimes a character can just walk in and say hello, it's okay. So I learned a valuable lesson, although it took several years for me to finally get that to sink in, that first and foremost, when you write any kind of a script, it's not a text, it's an event. And if the event doesn't work, change it. Change the text to make the event work.
For me, disclosure of information is the most important aspect of any story, really, but particularly in a screenplay. That's how, when, and why you give the audience information. It can be as simple as showing somebody in a red dress, or it can be a huge, big plot revelation like I See Dead People in The Sixth Sense. Most starting writers, I find, really don't give a lot of thought to how and when and why they give the audience information. So I think it's something you really need to think about. Watch movies like The Sixth Sense, Ordinary People, Reservoir Dogs, see creatively how people disclose information and use it to your best effect in your screenplay.
The worst thing that you actually do write and put on paper, the worst thing that you put on paper is always better than that perfect masterpiece that you keep in your head and you never write at all. And I tell that to students because often writers, when they're first starting out, they are reluctant to put their ideas down, because when you put your ideas down, you start seeing how imperfect they are. But if you keep them in your head, you can, sort of fantasize that they're wonderful. And so I try to discipline writers to get going, get it out of their head and onto paper, because it's not until it's on paper that it's really starting to behave like a story. And you can start to see how well it's behaving or not, and begin to do the difficult work of revising.
One of my top tips for screenwriters is discipline, to treat writing as a job, to go in, putting yourself in a frame of mind of going into an office every day and writing something, even if you don't feel like it or if you have to push yourself, that you come away with something by the end of the day, a page, an outline, and to really treat it as work, which it is, and treat it as a job you go to, and it's not something that you can treat lightly. And the discipline not only helps in terms of getting you on task and on target, but also improves your writing skills as well by doing it every single day.
One of the most important realizations that I've made over time on the business side of things is, much as we'd love for it to be only the work that matters, it's not just the work. It's how you present the work and how you present yourself. In film, and especially in television, you're asking people to spend lots of money on you and lots of time with you. And if you aren't a good person to be with and to work with, if you can't embrace the collaborative side of this business, then it's going to be really tough to get anybody to invest in your work or in you. So I think building those networking skills and the simple skills of actively listening and engaging in criticism and learning to both take and give notes with grace is crucial.
From a studio standpoint, I think the most important thing is to think about, does anybody want to watch this movie that I'm going to write? A lot of people don't think about that. You might have heard studios judge marketability by 4 quadrants. 4 quadrants: men below and over 25, women below and over 25. If you can't hit at least 2 of those quadrants, nobody's going to want to make the movie. So think about it. Does somebody really want to see this project? A lot of us, I even have one, want to write very personal projects. That's okay, but just know that, like mine, I'm going to have to make it on my own. I'm not going to have a studio breaking down my door to make the movie. Who wants to watch your movie? Why do they want to watch the movie? That's one of the most important things you can think about even before you start writing it.
Motivation is a product of activity, not a prerequisite, meaning you will get motivated once you break inertia and start beginning. You can't wait for motivation and inspiration. You sort of have to make it happen by committing to start working, start writing scenes, start writing a treatment, start writing whatever stage you're in, start writing. And then as you start to, create some flow, you will start to feel motivated.
Writing at the top of your intelligence is not assuming that the audience isn't as smart as you. In fact, assuming the opposite, that the audience is as smart, if not smarter. And writing intelligent characters, real characters, and not condescending to the audience or writing down to the audience and pushing yourself. It's harder to do it that way, but it's something that in the long run I think creates lasting work.
Write from faith and not from fear. Because when you write from fear, whether it's fear of the marketplace or fear of exploring your own heart or fear of what the person in the next office or on the next movie is working on, then you write tight and you write away from your natural instincts and away from the truth of your story. But when you write in faith in your talents, in the particular story that you've chosen, and in your ability to communicate it better than anybody else can, that's when you get the full flower and the full power of your talent, and when the story takes on a life of its own. And that's when people recognize what you're trying to do and are going to align themselves with you to help you and your story advance.
These are things not to do with a room full of writers. Do not call in sick and then come back 3 days later with a tan. You will not get away with it. What? I'm serious. These are my do not laugh the hardest at your own jokes or your own script. Lay back, let other people laugh. If you happen to win an Emmy for Best Writing, do not bring the Emmy in the next day to the office. Does not sit well with the writers. And don't take it to a network table read where you put it in front of you on the table so that all the actors and writers can see it. Because once you get up to get a bagel and you turn back around, it's gone. And you'll never see it again. Ever see it again.